Arizona is booming. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people arrive. They come for the sunshine, the space, the promise of a better life in the desert. New homes rise where there was once nothing. Entire neighborhoods appear almost overnight. Backyards fill with pools, parks turn green. Golf courses cut through the sand like they have always belonged there. From the outside, Arizona looks unstoppable. But Arizona is not supposed to look like this. It is one of the driest places in North America, a landscape shaped by scarcity, not abundance. So the question isn't why people are moving here. The real question is this: how does a desert keep growing without running out of what it needs most? Because beneath the success story, Arizona is quietly relying on a system that was never meant to carry this much weight. And that system is starting to show cracks. Arizona's natural environment is honest. It doesn't pretend to be lush. It doesn't hide its limits. Rainfall is scarce. Summers are brutal. Most native plants survive by conserving every drop of moisture they can. This land evolved for endurance, not excess. But modern Arizona was built on a very different idea. In the 20th century, air conditioning, cheap electricity, and aggressive development changed what people believed was possible. The desert became something to conquer, not adapt to. Cities expanded rapidly, faster than almost anywhere else in the country, and as long as water kept flowing, no one asked too many questions. Today, Arizona survives on a carefully balanced mix of water sources. 41% comes from groundwater, 36% from the Colorado River, 18% from rivers within the state, 5% from reclaimed water. On paper, this looks diversified. In reality, it's fragile, because every one of these sources has limits, and most of them are already under stress. Groundwater is Arizona's quiet backbone. When rain falls, which isn't often, some of it slowly seeps into the ground, collecting in cracks and spaces within layers of rock and sediment called aquifers. These aquifers don't refill quickly. In many cases, the water being pumped today entered the ground long before modern cities even existed. Groundwater now supplies over 40% of Arizona's water, more than any other single source. But groundwater is deceptive. You don't see it drop the way you see a reservoir empty. There are no visible warning signs until wells stop working. In the early 1900s, groundwater felt limitless. Farmers pumped freely, miners drilled deeper, cities expanded without restraint. In Tucson, this unchecked pumping drained the aquifer faster than it could naturally refill. The consequences were severe. The Santa Cruz River dried up, transforming a once-living waterway into a dry scar through the city. For the Tohono O'odham tribe, this wasn't just environmental damage. It was a loss of access, culture, and livelihood. Arizona learned something important here. Groundwater doesn't run out loudly. It disappears quietly until it's already gone. To reduce pressure on groundwater, Arizona turned to the Colorado River. The river cuts through 7 states and supports tens of millions of people. For Arizona, it became essential. Today, 36% of the state's water comes from the Colorado River. To make this possible, engineers built the Central Arizona Project, a vast canal system completed in the 1980s that lifts water hundreds of miles across desert terrain. It was one of the largest water infrastructure projects in American history, and it worked. But it also locked Arizona into a river that was already being pushed too hard. The Colorado River was divided based on an assumption that turned out to be disastrously wrong. Early agreements assumed the river carried 17 million acre-feet of water per year. Those estimates came from unusually wet decades. In reality, the river averages closer to 12 million acre-feet, and that number is falling. Climate change has reduced snowpack. Temperatures increase evaporation. Demand keeps rising. The river is now over-allocated by design. There simply isn't enough water to satisfy everyone who was promised a share. When shortages hit, not everyone shares the burden equally. Arizona is considered a junior user of Colorado River water. That means when cuts are required, older water rights are protected. Agriculture often takes priority. Cities like Phoenix and Tucson face reductions. Earlier major reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell have dropped to historic lows, exposing land that hasn't seen sunlight in decades. And while new rules are expected in 2026, negotiations are strained. Upper basin states argue the lower basin must cut more. Lower basin states argue everyone must share responsibility. Tribal nations worry their rights will once again be sidelined. The river isn't just drying up. The agreements holding it together are too. Arizona didn't wait for the system to fail completely. Instead, it invested heavily in reclaimed water. Treated wastewater that would normally be discarded is reused for irrigating crops, watering parks, supplying golf courses, generating electricity, restoring dried rivers. More than 70% of reclaimed water in Arizona is treated to A or A+ quality, meaning it's safe for human contact. This isn't a small contribution. As traditional sources shrink, reclaimed water becomes one of the few areas where supply can actually increase. In 2023, Arizona lifted its ban on direct potable reuse. This allows wastewater to be treated to drinking standards and sent directly back into the water supply. The idea unsettles people, understandably, but the reality is this: we already drink recycled water. Most systems simply disguise it with time and distance, releasing treated water into a river or aquifer before pulling it back out. Direct potable reuse removes that buffer, but not the purification. With modern filtration, the result can be as clean or cleaner than natural sources. As the Colorado River declines, this may shift from optional to necessary. Arizona has been here before. By 1980, water use hit record highs. Aquifers were collapsing, cities were expanding, there was no long-term control, so the state intervened. The 1980 Groundwater Management Act created 5 active management areas, covering 82% of the population. Their goal was simple in theory and difficult in practice: safe yield, using only as much groundwater as can be naturally replenished. Since then, over 3 trillion gallons have been stored back into aquifers. Enough water to support Phoenix for 30 years. It was a rare example of long-term planning actually working, but only where it applies. Outside the active management areas, many towns rely entirely on local groundwater. There are no massive canals, no backup systems, no easy alternatives. As water tables drop, wells dry up, costs increase, communities face hard limits. These towns don't make national headlines, but they may be the first places where growth simply stops. For most households, water use isn't dramatic. It's ordinary: lawns, toilets, leaks, evaporation. In desert cities, non-native landscaping alone accounts for enormous water loss. Simple changes matter. Arizona's population isn't slowing down. Phoenix is one of the fastest-growing metro areas in the United States. Entire master plan communities are approved years before water infrastructure is fully secured. On paper, developers are required to prove a 100-year water supply. In reality, those guarantees often depend on assumptions that may not hold. Future groundwater pumping, continued access to the Colorado River, stable political agreements, technologies that scale fast enough. Each new development adds pressure to a system already stretched thin. And once homes are built, there is no easy undo button. Water decisions made today lock in consequences for decades. Arizona didn't run out of water because it grew. It risks running out because it grew faster than certainty. When people imagine water use, they picture lawns and swimming pools. But cities are not the biggest consumer. Agriculture is. Roughly 72% of Arizona's water goes to farming. Much of that water grows crops in extreme heat, including water-intensive ones. These farms feed the country. They support local economies. But they also sit at the center of the water debate. When shortages arrive, agriculture is often protected by older water rights. Cities are asked to conserve. Residents are told to shorten showers. Meanwhile, fields continue to be irrigated. This isn't simple greed or negligence. It's the result of laws written long before modern Arizona existed. But it creates a growing tension between urban growth, rural livelihoods, long-term sustainability. At some point, something has to give. Arizona's future increasingly depends on engineering, recharge systems that store water underground, advanced wastewater purification, smarter irrigation, leak detection, efficiency standards. These solutions buy time. They stretch each drop further. They make survival possible. But technology has limits. It can't make it rain. It can't refill a shrinking river. And it can't fix over-allocation on its own. Every solution still depends on cooperation between cities, states, tribes, industries, and individuals. Without agreement, even the best systems fail. The danger isn't collapse tomorrow. The danger is slow erosion, where each year feels manageable until suddenly it isn't. If Arizona miscalculates, the consequences won't arrive as a single disaster. They'll arrive quietly. Higher water prices, stricter building limits, reduced agricultural output, rural towns losing viability, political conflict intensifying across the Southwest. Growth won't stop overnight, but it may become uneven, fragile, exclusive. Water has always shaped civilizations. In the desert, it decides who thrives and who leaves. Arizona is not out of water, but it is out of forgiveness. For decades, engineering allowed the state to bend the desert to human ambition. Canals, pumps, reservoirs, laws, technology. But the desert itself never changed. It still demands balance, restraint, respect. The question Arizona faces now isn't whether it can survive another decade. It probably can. The real question is whether it can accept limits before the limits accept it. Because in the end, the desert always collects what it's owed.